The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her hand. Jasmine stared at the divorce papers spread across the mahogany table, her signature line waiting like an open grave. 3 years of marriage reduced to legal documents and property divisions. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was about to end her marriage in the same penthouse where it had begun, where Marcus had proposed on one knee with tears in his eyes, promising her the world. Now those same eyes watched her from across the room, filled with something she couldn't quite read. Desperation? Regret? Or was it the same cold calculation that had driven him to build his billion-dollar empire? "Before you sign," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to ask you something." Jasmine's hand froze. She had been so close to ending this nightmare, so close to walking away from the man who had slowly broken her heart over the past year. The man who had grown distant, who worked 18-hour days, who had forgotten their anniversary and missed her birthday dinner because of some emergency board meeting. "What could you possibly have to say now, Marcus?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended, but she was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of trying, tired of feeling like she was married to a stranger. He stood up from behind his desk, all 6 feet 3 inches of him moving with the same fluid grace that had first caught her attention at that charity gala 4 years ago. His dark skin seemed to glow under the soft lighting of his office, and for a moment she remembered why she had fallen so hard for him. Before the money changed everything. Before success became his only mistress. "One night," he said, stepping closer. "Give me one last night. Let me show you what we used to have. What we could have again." Jasmine laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think one night is going to fix 3 years of neglect? 3 years of you choosing everything else over me? I know I messed up." His voice cracked slightly, and she saw something flicker across his face that she hadn't seen in months. Vulnerability. "I know I lost sight of what mattered. But before you walk away forever, before you sign those papers and we become strangers, give me a chance to remind you why we fell in love." She wanted to say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed at her to just sign the papers and leave. To walk out of this penthouse and never look back. To start the new life she had been planning for months. She had already found an apartment across town, already started looking for a new job, already begun the painful process of untangling her life from his. But something in his eyes stopped her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time in years. Maybe it was the memory of how good they used to be together, before the empire building consumed him. Or maybe it was the small, stubborn part of her heart that still loved him despite everything. "One night," she heard herself saying, though she couldn't believe the words were coming out of her mouth. "But this doesn't change anything, Marcus. Tomorrow morning I'm signing those papers." The relief that washed over his face was so profound that it almost made her change her mind right then and there. When was the last time her presence had mattered that much to him? When was the last time he had looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world? "Thank you," he whispered, and she could hear the emotion thick in his voice. "I know I don't deserve this. I know I don't deserve you." She set the pen down and pushed the papers away, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. "So what did you have in mind? Dinner at some fancy restaurant where you'll spend the whole time on your phone? A movie where you'll fall asleep because you've been working for 36 hours straight?" He shook his head, moving closer until he was standing right in front of her. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same one he'd worn on their first date. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the stress lines that hadn't been there when they'd first met. "No phones," he said firmly. "No work. No interruptions. Just us. Like it used to be." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But he had made promises before. He had sworn that things would change, that he would make more time for them, that his work wouldn't always come first. And every time she had watched him break those promises without even seeming to realize he was doing it. "You said that before," she reminded him, hating how small her voice sounded. "Remember our second anniversary? You promised me a whole weekend. Just us. No business calls, no meetings, no emergencies. And then what happened?" His face fell and she could see that he remembered. How could he not? It had been the beginning of the end for them. He had gotten a call about some deal falling through in Tokyo, and before she knew it, he was on a plane, leaving her alone in the hotel room they had booked for their romantic getaway. "That was different," he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. "Was it? What about my birthday last month? What about when I had the flu and you were in meetings all day? What about when I needed you after my mom's surgery, and you were closing that merger with the Henderson Group?" Each memory hit him like a physical blow, and she could see him flinch with every word. She wanted him to remember. She wanted him to understand exactly why she was leaving. I know, he said quietly. I know I failed you. I failed us. But please, Jasmine. One last chance. Let me show you that I remember what we used to mean to each other. She studied his face, looking for any sign that this was just another manipulation, another business strategy. Marcus was brilliant at reading people, at knowing exactly what to say to get what he wanted. It was what had made him so successful. But was that all this was? A calculated move to keep her from taking half his assets in the divorce? No. The pain in his eyes was too real. The way his hands shook slightly as he reached for her was too genuine. Whatever else Marcus was, he wasn't a good enough actor to fake the raw emotion she saw in his face. Okay, she said finally. One night. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. This isn't about the money. It never was. I don't want your fortune or your penthouse or your cars. I just wanted my husband back. I wanted the man I married, not the stranger you became. He nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. And I'm going to do everything in my power to show you that man is still here. That he never really left. He just got lost for a while. She looked at the divorce papers one more time, then back at Marcus. Tomorrow this would all be over. Tomorrow she would sign those papers and walk out of his life forever. But tonight she would let herself remember what it felt like to be loved by Marcus Williams. What it felt like to be the center of his universe instead of just another item on his endless to-do list. So, she said, crossing her arms over her chest, what exactly do you have planned for this last night of ours? The smile that spread across his face was the first genuine one she had seen from him in months. It was the smile that had made her fall in love with him in the first place, back when he was just an ambitious young man with big dreams instead of a billionaire who had achieved everything he'd ever wanted except the one thing that mattered most. Leave that to me, he said. Just trust me. One more time. Trust. Such a simple word, but it felt impossible. How could she trust the man who had broken her heart over and over again? How could she trust someone who had proven that she would always come second to his empire? But looking at him now, seeing something in his eyes that had been missing for so long, she found herself nodding. Okay, I'll trust you. One last time. Marcus had sent her home to change, promising to pick her up at 7. Jasmine stood in front of her closet, staring at the clothes that would soon be packed up and moved to her new apartment. Everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. She pulled out a simple black dress, one Marcus had always loved on her. It wasn't too fancy, wasn't trying too hard. Just elegant and understated, the way she preferred to dress. As she slipped it on, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and was surprised by what she saw. Despite everything, despite the pain and the exhaustion and the heartbreak, she looked good. Strong. Like a woman who knew her worth. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Marcus had always been punctual, even back when they were dating. It was one of the things she had admired about him. He respected other people's time, treated every commitment as sacred. Except, apparently, the commitment he had made to her. She opened the door to find him standing there in a simple button-down shirt and dark jeans. No suit, no tie, no phone in his hand. He looked younger somehow, more like the man she had fallen in love with. More like the Marcus who used to spend hours talking to her about his dreams, who used to bring her coffee in bed on Sunday mornings, who used to look at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. You look incredible, he said softly, and the way he said it made her believe he meant it. Thank you. She grabbed her purse and jacket, trying to ignore the way her heart skipped when he offered her his arm. So where are we going? Some 5-star restaurant where the waiters know you by name. He shook his head, leading her toward the elevator. Actually, I thought we could go somewhere that means something to us. Somewhere we haven't been in a long time. The curiosity was killing her, but she didn't ask. Part of her was afraid to hope, afraid to let herself believe that he might actually remember the places that had been special to them. Too many times over the past year, he had forgotten important dates and locations, too consumed with work to remember the details of their relationship. They drove in comfortable silence through the city streets. Jasmine found herself stealing glances at him as he navigated the traffic. His hands on the steering wheel were steady, confident. The same hands that had once traced every inch of her skin, that had held her when she cried, that had worn her wedding ring like a badge of honor. He still wore the ring, she noticed. Even though they had been separated for 3 months, even though she had stopped wearing hers weeks ago. It was a simple platinum band, nothing flashy or ostentatious. Marcus had never been one for showing off, despite his wealth. Even now, driving his modest sedan instead of one of the luxury cars in his garage, he seemed more like the man she had married than the distant stranger he had become. Do you remember our third date? He asked suddenly, breaking the silence. She was surprised he remembered they'd had a third date, much less the details of it. The deli? Goldstein's Deli, he said with a smile. You ordered the pastrami on rye with extra pickles and I got the corned beef. We sat in that tiny booth in the corner and talked for 4 hours. The memory came flooding back. They had been dating for 2 weeks and she had been starting to fall for him hard. But she'd also been testing him, wanting to see if he was the kind of man who would be embarrassed to be seen with her in a place that didn't have tablecloths and sommelier. Instead, he had seemed delighted by the choice. He'd chatted with the elderly owner like they were old friends, had complimented the homemade bread, had laughed when she'd gotten mustard on her chin. It was the night she'd realized he wasn't just another wealthy man looking for arm candy. He was genuine, down-to-earth, someone who could find joy in simple pleasures. I was so nervous, she admitted. I thought you'd be horrified. All the other guys I dated would have insisted on some fancy place in Manhattan. I loved it, he said. I loved watching you eat with such enthusiasm. I loved the way you argued with me about baseball statistics. I loved that you weren't trying to impress me with how little you could eat or how sophisticated your palate was. I can't believe you remember all that. He glanced over at her, his expression serious. I remember everything about those early days, Jasmine. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment when I realized I was falling in love with you. I know I've been terrible about remembering things lately, but those memories, they're the most precious things I have. Her throat tightened with emotion. This was the Marcus she had fallen in love with, the one who paid attention to details, who made her feel like she was the most interesting person in the world. Where had this man been for the past year? They pulled up in front of Goldstein's Deli, and Jasmine couldn't help but smile. The little restaurant looked exactly the same as it had 4 years ago. Same neon sign, same cramped storefront wedged between a dry cleaner and a convenience store. It wasn't much to look at, but it had been the site of one of the best nights of her life. They're still open, Marcus said, sounding almost surprised. Did you think they wouldn't be? I don't know. So much has changed. I guess I thought maybe. He trailed off, shaking his head. Come on. Let's see if our booth is still there. The inside of the deli was just as she remembered it. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floor, the smell of freshly baked bread and simmering soup. The same elderly man stood behind the counter, his hair a little grayer but his smile just as warm. Marcus, the old man called out. I haven't seen you in ages. And beautiful Jasmine. How are you too? Jasmine felt a pang in her chest. Mr. Goldstein remembered them. This sweet old man who probably served hundreds of customers every week remembered them as a couple. Had probably been wondering why they'd stopped coming in. We're good, Mr. G, Marcus said, though his voice caught slightly on the words. How's the family? Can't complain. Sarah just had another baby. That makes 4 grandchildren now. He beamed with pride. Your usual booth is empty. Go ahead and sit. I'll bring you the regular order. They slid into the same booth they'd shared on that third date, facing each other across the worn formica table. Jasmine ran her fingers over the surface, remembering how nervous she'd been, how Marcus had reached across to take her hand when she'd started talking about her job at the nonprofit. He remembers us, she said softly. We used to come here every month, Marcus replied. For the first 2 years we were together. Until you got too busy. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended, but she couldn't take them back. Marcus winced. Until I got too stupid to remember what mattered. Mr. Goldstein appeared with their order, the same sandwiches they'd had on that first night, the same pickles, the same cream sodas. Jasmine was touched that Marcus had remembered so many details, but it also made her sad. If he could remember a sandwich order from 4 years ago, why couldn't he remember their anniversary? Why couldn't he remember to call when he was going to be late for dinner? I know what you're thinking, Marcus said after they'd been eating in silence for a few minutes. Do you? You're wondering why I can remember this but I forgot your birthday last month. She looked up at him, surprised by his perception. Actually, yeah. That's exactly what I'm thinking. He set down his sandwich and leaned back in the booth. I've been asking myself the same question. And I think it's because this was from before. Before the company got so big, before the pressure became so intense. Before I let success turn me into someone I don't even recognize. What happened to you, Marcus? She asked quietly. When did making money become more important than making memories? He was quiet for a long time, staring down at his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a pain she hadn't seen before. Do you remember the night I told you about my father? She nodded. It had been about 6 months into their relationship. Marcus rarely talked about his childhood, But that night he had opened up about growing up poor, about watching his father work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. About the shame he'd felt wearing second-hand clothes to school, about the promises he'd made to himself that he would never be poor again. "I spent my whole childhood watching my dad break his back for pennies," Marcus continued. "Watching my mom stretch every dollar until it screamed. I swore I would never put my family through that. I swore I would build something that would protect the people I loved." "But Marcus, you achieved that years ago. The company is worth billions. We could have lived comfortably for 10 lifetimes on what you'd already built. Why did you keep pushing so hard?" He ran his hands through his hair, looking frustrated. "Because it never felt like enough. There was always another deal, another acquisition, another opportunity. And I told myself I was doing it for us. For our future. For the family we were going to have." The mention of children hit her like a physical blow. They had talked about having kids someday, had even picked out names. But as Marcus had gotten busier and their relationship had deteriorated, those conversations had stopped. The future they had planned together had slowly faded away, replaced by his obsession with building his empire. "But you weren't doing it for us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were doing it for you. To prove something to yourself. And you lost sight of everything else." "I know." His voice was thick with regret. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry, Jasmine. I let my fears turn me into the kind of man I used to despise. I let success become my god, and I sacrificed everything that actually mattered on its altar." She could see that he meant it. The pain in his eyes was real, the regret genuine. But was it enough? Was understanding why he had hurt her enough to heal the wounds he had inflicted? "I want to believe you," she said finally. "I want to believe that you understand what you've done. But Marcus, you've apologized before. You've promised to change before. And then a week later, you're back to working 18-hour days and treating me like I'm just another item on your schedule. This time is different." "How? How is this time different from all the other times you've promised to do better?" He reached across the table and took her hands in his. His touch was warm, familiar, and for a moment she let herself remember what it felt like to be connected to him. "Because this time I'm about to lose you. Really lose you. And the thought of that, of living without you." He shook his head, unable to finish the sentence. She wanted to pull her hands away, wanted to protect herself from the hope that was blooming in her chest. But something in his touch, in the way he was looking at her, made her stay still. "One night," she reminded him. "That's all we agreed to." "I know. And I'm grateful for it. More grateful than you'll ever know." They finished their meal in thoughtful silence, both lost in memories of happier times. When Mr. Goldstein brought the check, Marcus paid and left a generous tip, just like he always had. Some things at least hadn't changed. As they walked back to the car, Jasmine felt the weight of the evening settling over her. Tomorrow she would sign those papers. Tomorrow this would all be over. But tonight she was going to let herself remember what it felt like to be in love with Marcus Williams. "So what's next?" she asked as they got in the car. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached his eyes. "Next we go dancing." The jazz club was tucked away in a basement on the Lower East Side, the kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. But Jasmine recognized it immediately. It was where Marcus had taken her for their first real date, where they danced to a live band until 2 in the morning, where she'd first realized that this man might be someone special. "The Blue Moon," she said as they descended the narrow stairs. "I can't believe it's still here." "I called ahead to make sure," Marcus admitted. "I wanted tonight to be perfect." The club was exactly as she remembered it. Dim lighting, small round tables, a tiny stage where a 3-piece band was playing soft jazz. The same smoky atmosphere, the same intimate feeling that made you want to whisper and lean close to your companion. They found a table near the back just like they had on that first date. "Do you remember what song was playing when we first danced?" Marcus asked as they settled into their seats. She did remember. How could she forget? It had been At Last by Etta James, and when Marcus had asked her to dance, her heart had nearly stopped. She'd been attracted to him from the moment they'd met at that charity gala, but dancing with him, feeling his arms around her, had been the moment she'd known she was in trouble. "At last," she said softly. "I requested it for tonight," he said. "I hope you don't mind." Before she could respond, the band finished their current song and the lead singer, a beautiful woman with silver hair and a voice like honey, stepped up to the microphone. "This next song goes out to a very special couple," she announced. "Sometimes we get second chances at first dances." The opening notes of At Last filled the air, and Jasmine felt her breath catch in her throat. Marcus stood up and extended his hand to her, just like he had 4 years ago. "Dance with me," he said. "One more time." She hesitated for just a moment, knowing that once she took his hand, once she let him hold her, it would be that much harder to walk away tomorrow. But the music was calling to her, and the memory of their first dance was too powerful to resist. She took his hand. The dance floor was small and crowded, but somehow it felt like they were the only two people in the room. Marcus pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other holding her hand against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat beneath her palm, strong and steady, and for a moment it was like no time had passed at all. "I've missed this," he murmured against her ear. "I've missed holding you." She had missed it too, though she tried not to think about it. Missed the way they fit together perfectly, the way he could lead her in a dance without her even having to think about the steps. Missed the way he smelled, the way his hand felt warm and sure on her back. "We were good at this," she said as they swayed together. "Dancing, I mean." "We were good at a lot of things," he replied. "Before I screwed it all up." The song seemed to last forever and not nearly long enough. When it ended, they stayed on the dance floor holding each other, neither wanting to break the spell. The next song was slower, more intimate, and Marcus pulled her even closer. "I love you," he whispered, so quietly she almost didn't hear it. "I know I have no right to say that anymore, I know I lost the right to your love, but I need you to know. I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life." The words sent a sharp pain through her chest. She'd wanted to hear them for so long, had waited months for him to remember that he loved her, to show her that she mattered. And now, on the night before their divorce, he was finally saying the words she'd been desperate to hear. "Marcus," she started, but he shook his head. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever you decide, I needed you to know that leaving you would be the biggest mistake of my life." They danced for another hour, talking quietly between songs, sharing memories of their early days together. Marcus told her about the first time he'd seen her at the charity gala, how she'd been arguing passionately with a board member about funding for literacy programs, how her passion and conviction had taken his breath away. "You were wearing a red dress," he said. "And you were so animated, so alive. I knew I had to meet you. I remember you coming over," she said. "I thought you were going to tell me to keep my voice down. Instead, I asked if you needed backup. You looked at me like I was crazy. I thought you were just another rich guy trying to show off. I had no idea you actually cared about the cause." "I didn't at first," he admitted. "I went to those galas because it was good for business. But listening to you talk about the kids you were helping, seeing how much you cared, it made me want to care too." She remembered that night so clearly. How surprised she'd been when this handsome, well-dressed stranger had not only listened to her passionate speech about childhood literacy but had asked thoughtful questions and made a substantial donation on the spot. How he'd asked her to dinner not to impress him with expensive restaurants and designer clothes, but to hear more about her work. "You donated $50,000 that night," she said. "Just like that. Best money I ever spent. It got me a second chance to talk to you. And now here we are, 4 years later, about to sign divorce papers." The words hung between them like a weight. Marcus's arms tightened around her, as if he could physically hold on to what they'd had. "It doesn't have to end this way," he said. "We could try again. We could go to counseling, take a break from the business, remember what we used to mean to each other." She wanted to believe him. Standing there in his arms, feeling more connected to him than she had in months, it was tempting to think that maybe they could find their way back to each other. But she'd been down this road before. She'd given him chance after chance, had made excuse after excuse for his behavior. "You said that after you missed our anniversary," she reminded him. "You said we'd take a vacation, just the two of us. And then what happened?" His face fell. "The Singapore deal came up. And you left me alone at the resort for 3 days while you flew halfway around the world to close it. I know I failed you. But Jasmine, I swear to you, if you give me another chance." "You'll what? Suddenly become a different person? Suddenly stop being obsessed with making more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes?" He was quiet for a long moment and she could see him struggling with something. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the music. "What if I told you I was thinking about selling the company?" She stopped dancing, staring at him in shock. "What? The company? What if I sold it? Step back, let someone else run it? What if I chose you over everything else just this once?" "Marcus, you can't be serious. The company is your life. It's everything you've worked for." "No," he said firmly. "You're everything I've worked for. The company was supposed to be a means to an end, a way to build a life for us. But somewhere along the way it became the end itself. and I lost sight of what really mattered. She searched his face, looking for any sign that he was just saying what he thought she wanted to hear. But his eyes were serious, determined. He meant it. He was actually considering giving up his empire for her. You can't sell the company, she said. Think about all the people who work for you. Think about all the deals you have in progress. You can't just walk away. I could step back. Bring in someone else to run the day-to-day operations. I built something bigger than just me. It can survive without me being there 18 hours a day. The thought was tempting. So tempting that it scared her. But she'd learned not to trust Marcus's promises, no matter how sincere they seemed. And what happens in 6 months when you're bored? What happens when you see some opportunity you can't resist? What happens when you realize you've given up everything that made you who you are? Then I'll remember that who I am is supposed to be your husband first, businessman second. I'll remember that love is more important than money. That you are more important than any deal I could ever make. The music ended and couples around them began to leave the dance floor. But Jasmine and Marcus stayed where they were, holding each other, both afraid to let go. I don't know if I can trust you, she said finally. I want to. God, I want to so badly. But you've broken my heart so many times, Marcus. I don't know if I can survive it again. Then don't trust me, he said. Trust us. Trust what we used to have. Trust that it's worth fighting for. She looked up at him, seeing the man she'd fallen in love with shining through the stranger he'd become. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could find their way back to each other. Maybe love really could conquer all. But then she remembered all the broken promises, all the missed dinners, all the nights she'd fallen asleep alone while he worked in his office. Could she really put herself through that again? I need time to think, she said. We have the rest of the night, he replied. Let me show you how much you mean to me. Let me prove that the man you married is still here. She wanted to say yes. Every part of her body was screaming at her to give him another chance, to let herself believe that this time could be different. But her mind, the rational part that had been protecting her for months, urged caution. One night, she said finally. That's what we agreed to. Let's see where it takes us. Marcus smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in ages. Then let's make it a night to remember. As they walked off the dance floor together, hand in hand, Jasmine tried to quiet the voice in her head that was warning her to be careful. Tomorrow she could go back to being practical, back to protecting herself. But tonight she was going to let herself feel. Tonight she was going to remember what it was like to be in love. They left the jazz club near midnight and walked through the quiet streets of the city. The night air was cool and crisp, perfect for walking hand in hand like they used to do in the early days of their relationship. Jasmine had almost forgotten how much she enjoyed these simple moments with Marcus, when they weren't rushing to get somewhere or distracted by phones and obligations. I have one more stop planned, Marcus said as they approached his car. But first, I want to show you something. He led her to a small park across the street, one she'd never noticed before despite passing this area dozens of times. It was tiny, wedged between two buildings with just a few benches and a small fountain. But it was peaceful, a little oasis in the busy city. I found this place about 6 months ago, Marcus said as they sat down on one of the benches. I was walking around after a particularly brutal meeting, trying to clear my head, and I stumbled across it. It's beautiful, Jasmine said, looking around at the carefully maintained flower beds and the way the streetlights created patterns through the tree branches. I can't believe I never knew it was here. I've been coming here a lot lately, Marcus continued, especially after we separated. When the penthouse felt too empty, when the office felt too suffocating, I'd come here and think about us. About what I'd lost. She turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. You've been thinking about us? Every day, he said simply. Every single day since you moved out. I kept telling myself I was too busy to miss you, that the company needed my full attention. But the truth is I was miserable. I am miserable. The success doesn't mean anything without you to share it with. His words were like a balm to her wounded heart. For months she'd wondered if he'd even noticed she was gone. He'd seemed so consumed with work that she'd started to believe she could disappear from his life completely and he wouldn't care. You have a funny way of showing it, she said, but without the bitterness that had colored her words earlier. You haven't called. You haven't texted. The only time I hear from you is through lawyers. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their early days together. He used to do that when he was nervous, when he was trying to find the right words. I wanted to call, he said. Every day I picked up the phone to call you. But what was I going to say? That I was sorry? You'd heard that before. That I would change? You'd heard that too. I knew words weren't enough anymore. I knew I had to prove myself with actions. And what actions were those? Working even longer hours? Taking on even more projects? No, he said quietly. I've been seeing a therapist. That stopped her cold. Marcus, who prided himself on being strong and self-reliant, who had never wanted to appear weak or vulnerable to anyone, had been seeing a therapist? You have. Twice a week for the past 2 months. Dr. Sarah Chin. She specializes in helping people who've let their careers consume their lives. He looked at her with something that might have been embarrassment. She says I have what she calls success addiction. That I've been using work as a drug to avoid dealing with deeper issues. Jasmine was speechless. She'd suggested therapy multiple times over the past year, but Marcus had always dismissed it. He'd said they could work out their problems on their own, that they didn't need some stranger analyzing their relationship. What changed? She asked. What made you finally agree to get help? You did, he said simply. The day you moved out, when you looked at me and said you felt like you were married to a ghost. That's when I realized I'd lost myself completely. I didn't even recognize the man I'd become. She remembered that day vividly. It had been the hardest thing she'd ever done, packing her bags while Marcus stood in the doorway of their bedroom, looking lost and confused. She tried to explain why she was leaving, but he'd seemed genuinely shocked that their marriage was falling apart. I thought you were just going through a phase, he continued. I thought you'd come back after a few days, that we'd work it out like we always did. But when weeks passed and you didn't come home, that's when it hit me. I was losing the best thing that ever happened to me. So what has Dr. Chin told you? Jasmine asked, genuinely curious. What did she say about us? Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. She said that I've been using success as a way to feel worthy of love. That growing up poor left me with this deep fear that I wasn't good enough, that people would leave me if I didn't prove my worth through achievements. That made sense actually. Jasmine had always known that Marcus's childhood had affected him deeply, but she'd never understood how much until now. She also said that I was unconsciously testing you, he continued. Pushing you away to see if you'd leave because somewhere deep down I believed that everyone eventually would. A self-fulfilling prophecy, Jasmine murmured. Exactly. The more successful I became, the more afraid I was of losing it all. So I worked harder and harder, thinking I was protecting our future, but really I was destroying our present. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fountain and listening to the distant sounds of the city. Jasmine felt like she was seeing Marcus clearly for the first time in months. Not the driven businessman who had consumed their marriage, but the vulnerable man underneath who was just as scared of losing love as she was of not being loved. There's something else, Marcus said eventually. Something Dr. Chin helped me realize about myself. What's that? I've been afraid to have children. The admission hit her like a physical blow. They'd talked about having kids so many times, had even started trying a year ago before Marcus had gotten so consumed with work that their intimate life had all but disappeared. Afraid? She repeated. Terrified, he corrected. Of being the kind of father mine was. Of working so much that I'd miss my kids growing up. Of not being able to provide for them the way I wanted to. Of screwing them up the way I've screwed up everything else that mattered. Marcus, she said softly, reaching for his hand. You wouldn't be like your father. You're nothing like him. Aren't I? He asked bitterly. Look at how I've treated you. Look at how I've put work before the person I love most. What kind of father would I be if I can't even be a decent husband? She could see the pain in his eyes, the self-doubt that had been eating away at him. No wonder he'd been so distant, so focused on building his empire. He'd been running from his fears instead of facing them. You want to know what kind of father you'd be? She said firmly. You'd be the kind who remembers every detail of your child's first steps, first words, first day of school. You'd be the kind who shows up to every game, every recital, every parent-teacher conference. You'd be present, Marcus. When something matters to you, really matters, you don't forget it. How can you be so sure? Because of tonight, she said. Because you remembered our third date, our first dance, every little detail that made us fall in love. Because when you focus on something you care about, you give it everything you have. He turned to look at her, hope flickering in his eyes. Do you really believe that? I do. The problem was never that you didn't care, Marcus. The problem was that you stopped believing you deserved to be happy. You stopped believing that love was enough. And what about you? He asked quietly. Do you still believe love is enough? It was the question she'd been avoiding all night. Did she still believe in them? Did she still believe that love could overcome the hurt and disappointment of the past year? I want to, she said honestly. But I'm scared too. I'm scared of going through this again. I'm scared of watching you disappear into your work. I'm scared of feeling like I don't matter. You matter more than anything, Marcus said fiercely. You matter more than the company, more than money, more than any success I could ever achieve. I know I haven't shown you that, but it's true. It's always been true. Then prove it, she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. If you really mean what you're saying, prove it. How? Tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. What would it take for her to trust him again? What would convince her that this time was different? I want you to walk away, she said finally. What? From the company. Tomorrow. I want you to call your board and tell them you're stepping down as CEO. I want you to hand over the day-to-day operations to someone else. I want you to choose me, Marcus. Choose us. For real this time. He stared at her and she could see him processing what she'd asked. It was a huge request, maybe an unfair one. But she needed to know that he was serious, that he really was willing to put their marriage first. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Okay, I'll do it. I'll call an emergency board meeting tomorrow and announce that I'm stepping back. I'll find someone to take over as CEO and I'll transition to an advisory role. Part-time with clear boundaries about when I'm available and when I'm not. She searched his face, looking for any sign of hesitation or regret. But his expression was calm, determined. He meant it. Just like that, she asked. You'd give up everything you've built? I'm not giving it up, he said. I'm just changing my relationship with it. The company will be fine without me micromanaging every decision. Maybe it'll be better. And I'll be free to focus on what really matters. And what's that? You, he said simply. The family we always talked about having. The life we planned before I got so caught up in proving myself that I forgot what I was trying to prove myself for. Jasmine felt tears prick at her eyes. She'd dreamed of hearing these words from him for so long, had fantasized about the day he would finally choose her over his empire. And now, on the night before their divorce, he was offering her everything she'd ever wanted. There's one more place I want to take you, Marcus said, standing up and offering her his hand. One more stop before the night is over. She took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. Where? You'll see, he said with a smile. Trust me. As they walked back to the car, Jasmine felt like she was in a dream. Everything about this night had been perfect. The restaurant, the dancing, this quiet conversation in the park. Marcus had been everything she'd fallen in love with and more. But could she really trust that it would last? Could she really believe that he would follow through on his promises this time? Only time would tell. But for now, for tonight, she was going to let herself hope. She was going to let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, love really could conquer all. The drive took them out of the city and into the countryside, past rolling hills and quiet farms. Jasmine watched the landscape change outside her window, wondering where Marcus was taking her. They'd been driving for almost an hour, and he still hadn't given her any clues about their destination. Are you kidnapping me? She asked, only half joking. Marcus laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Would that be so bad? A few more hours where you can't sign those divorce papers. Marcus. I'm kidding, he said quickly. Sort of. We're almost there, I promise. They turned off the main road onto a gravel driveway that wound through a grove of oak trees. At the end of the drive sat a small cottage, all stone and timber with flower boxes under the windows and a wraparound porch. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, perfectly maintained but clearly old and full of character. Where are we? Jasmine asked as Marcus parked the car. This is going to sound crazy, Marcus said, turning off the engine but not getting out. But I bought this place 3 months ago. You bought it? Why? Because I remembered you talking about it. Do you remember about 2 years ago we were driving upstate to visit your college roommate, and we passed a place that looked just like this? You said it was your dream house, that someday you wanted to live somewhere quiet and peaceful, away from the noise of the city. She did remember. They'd been stuck in traffic and she'd been daydreaming out loud about what their life might look like in 10 years. She talked about having a garden, maybe some chickens, definitely a big front porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. It had been a silly fantasy, the kind of thing you say when you're comfortable and happy and thinking about the future. You remembered that? I remembered everything you said that day. About wanting space to breathe, about raising kids somewhere they could run around and be free. About having time to actually enjoy life instead of just surviving it. She stared at the cottage, hardly believing what she was seeing. You bought this for me? I bought it for us, Marcus corrected. I know I haven't been the husband you deserved, but I never stopped thinking about the future we planned together. I never stopped wanting to give you everything you dreamed of. They got out of the car and walked up the stone path to the front door. Marcus pulled out a key and unlocked it, gesturing for her to go first. The inside was even more beautiful than the outside: exposed wooden beams, a stone fireplace, windows that looked out over acres of meadow and trees. It was rustic but comfortable, exactly the kind of place she'd always imagined living someday. Marcus, this is incredible, she breathed, walking through the living room and into the kitchen. Everything had been recently renovated but with respect for the original character of the house. How did you find it? I hired a real estate agent to look for places that matched your description, he said, following her through the rooms. It took her 2 months to find this one. The previous owners were an elderly couple who'd lived here for 40 years. They took really good care of it. She opened the back door and stepped out onto a deck that overlooked a vegetable garden and a small pond. In the distance she could see a red barn and what looked like a chicken coop. It was like he'd reached into her dreams and made them real. There are 5 acres, Marcus said, joining her on the deck. Room for a garden, for kids to play, for whatever you want. The barn is structurally sound but needs some work. I thought maybe we could renovate it together, turn it into a workshop or a studio. You thought of everything, she said, and there were tears in her voice now. But Marcus, why are you showing me this now? Tomorrow I'm signing divorce papers. Tomorrow this all ends. Because I want you to know that I never stopped dreaming about our future together, he said. Even when I was working 20-hour days, even when I was missing dinners and anniversaries, part of me was still planning for this. For us. She turned to face him, and she could see her own emotions reflected in his eyes. Love, hope, fear, desperation, it was all there, laid bare. It's beautiful, she said. It's everything I ever wanted. But Marcus, a house doesn't fix what's broken between us. A house doesn't erase the past year. I know that, he said. But maybe it could be a fresh start. Maybe we could leave the city, leave all the temptations and distractions behind. Maybe we could remember what it was like to just be Marcus and Jasmine, not the CEO and his wife. The idea was appealing, so appealing that it scared her. She could picture their life here, quiet mornings on the porch, afternoons working in the garden, evenings by the fireplace. She could imagine children running through the meadow, laughter filling the rooms that now sat empty. It was everything she'd ever wanted. But wanting something and trusting that it would happen were two different things. What about your work? She asked. Even if you step back from the CEO role, you'll still have responsibilities. You'll still need to be in the city sometimes. It's only an hour-and-a-half drive, Marcus said. I could go in a few days a week, work from home the rest of the time. And honestly, Jasmine, I'm tired. I'm tired of the pressure, the constant stress, the feeling like I can never do enough or be enough. I want to slow down. I want to remember what it feels like to be human. She walked over to the porch railing and leaned against it, looking out over the property. It really was perfect. Too perfect, maybe? Like something that was too good to be true. Can I ask you something? She said without turning around. Anything. If I hadn't moved out, if I hadn't asked for a divorce, would you still have bought this place? Would you still be talking about stepping back from work? The question hung in the air between them. She could feel Marcus thinking, wrestling with the honesty she was asking for. I don't know, he said finally. I want to say yes, but I don't know. Maybe it took the thought of losing you to wake me up. Maybe I needed to hit rock bottom before I could see clearly again. At least he was being honest. She appreciated that, even if the answer wasn't what she'd hoped to hear. I've been angry at you for so long, she said quietly. Angry and hurt and disappointed. But standing here, seeing this place, hearing everything you've said tonight, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just sad. Sad. Sad that it took us getting to this point for you to remember what mattered. Sad that we wasted so much time. Sad that I have to choose between protecting myself and believing in us. Marcus came up behind her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his presence. You don't have to choose tonight, he said. Take the time you need. I'll wait. What if I sign those papers tomorrow? What if I decide I can't take the risk? Then I'll respect your decision, he said, though she could hear the pain in his voice. I'll step back from the company anyway because you were right. I need to remember who I am outside of work. And I'll keep this place because it reminds me of what I should have been fighting for all along. She turned around to face him, studying his expression in the moonlight. He looked older than he had that morning, worn down by emotion and regret. But he also looked more like himself than he had in months. I need to ask you something else, she said. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Do you love me or do you love the idea of not losing? Because there's a difference, Marcus. And I need to know which one this is. The question seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He stepped back, running his hands through his hair again. That's a hard question, he said finally. But it's an important one. He was quiet for a long time, looking out over the property. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. 6 months ago, I would have said I loved you, he said. But if I'm being completely honest, I think part of what I loved was having you. Knowing that I'd won you, that someone as incredible as you had chosen me. I loved the security of knowing you were there, waiting for me to come home. The admission stung, but she appreciated his honesty. And now, she asked. Now I realize that love isn't about having someone, he said, looking directly at her. It's about seeing them, really seeing them, and wanting their happiness even more than your own. It's about putting their needs first, not because you have to, but because their joy is your joy. And do you see me, Marcus? Really see me? I see a woman who gave her heart to a man who didn't deserve it, he said. I see someone who tried to save a marriage while her husband was too blind to realize it was drowning. I see strength and grace and a capacity for love that humbles me. And what do you want from me? What would make me happy? I want you to feel loved every single day, he said without hesitation. I want you to feel seen and heard and valued. I want you to have the family you've always dreamed of, the quiet life you've always wanted. I want you to wake up every morning knowing that you're the most important thing in someone's world. And if that someone isn't you? If I decide I can't trust you with my heart again? The pain that flashed across his face was unmistakable, but his voice was steady when he answered. Then I want you to find someone who will give you all of that and more. Someone who won't make the mistakes I made. Someone who will appreciate what a gift it is to be loved by you. She felt tears spilling down her cheeks now. This was the Marcus she'd fallen in love with, the man who could put her happiness above his own ego. He was still in there, underneath all the success and pressure and fear. I don't want someone else, she whispered. I never did. I just wanted you to want me as much as I wanted you. I do, he said fiercely. I want you more than anything I've ever wanted in my life. More than success, more than money, more than any empire I could build. You are everything to me, Jasmine. You always have been. I just forgot how to show it. She looked at him standing there in the moonlight, pouring his heart out to her, and felt something shift inside her chest. The wall she'd built around her heart, the one that had been protecting her from more pain, began to crack. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, he said. Terrified. But I'd rather be scared with you than successful without you. She stepped closer to him, close enough to touch. If I gave you another chance, if I decided to trust you one more time, what would that look like? What would be different? Everything, he said immediately. I'd step back from the company like I promised. We'd move here, start fresh. I'd go to therapy, we'd go to therapy together. I'd prove to you every single day that you're my priority. And when things get hard, when old habits start to creep back in, then you call me on it, he said. You hold me accountable. You don't let me slide back into old patterns. We fight for this together. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the stubble beneath her palm. He leaned into her touch like a man dying of thirst who'd finally found water. I love you, she said quietly. Despite everything, despite all the hurt and disappointment, I still love you. I never stopped. I love you too, he replied, covering her hand with his. I love you so much it scares me. The thought of losing you has been killing me. You're not going to lose me, she said, making the decision even as the words left her lips. But Marcus, this is your last chance. I mean it. If you let me down again, if you go back to putting work first, I'm gone. And I won't come back. Relief flooded his face, followed quickly by determination. I won't let you down, he promised. I swear to you I won't let you down. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It tasted like new beginnings and second chances, like all the love they'd almost lost and all the love they still had to give. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. So what happens now? She asked. Now we go home, Marcus said. And tomorrow, instead of signing divorce papers, we start planning our new life together. They drove back to the city in comfortable silence, hands intertwined across the center console. Jasmine kept stealing glances at Marcus, still hardly believing that this night had happened. That he had remembered so many details about their early relationship, that he had bought the cottage of her dreams, that he was willing to step back from his company for her. Most of all, she couldn't believe that she had decided to trust him again. It went against every self-protective instinct she'd developed over the past year. But something about tonight had felt different. The man sitting beside her was the Marcus she'd fallen in love with, not the distant stranger he'd become. I have a confession to make, Marcus said as they pulled into the parking garage of their building. What's that? I never actually scheduled the meeting with the lawyers for tomorrow. I canceled it 3 days ago. She turned to stare at him. You canceled it? But the papers are still sitting on my desk and signed. I know you were planning to sign them, but I couldn't bring myself to make it official. I kept hoping something would change. Marcus Williams, you manipulative, she started, but she was smiling as she said it. I know, but I had to try. I couldn't let you go without a fight. They rode the elevator up to the penthouse in comfortable silence. It felt strange walking into their old home together after 3 months of separation. Strange but right somehow. Like she was finally coming back to where she belonged. The penthouse looked exactly the same as when she'd left it, but somehow it felt different. Maybe because Marcus felt different. Maybe because she felt different. I should probably call my lawyer in the morning, she said as they stood in the foyer, suddenly awkward with each other. Let him know that what are we doing exactly? We're trying again, Marcus said firmly. We're going to counseling, we're moving to the cottage, and we're going to remember how to be happy together. And your company? I'll call an emergency board meeting for Monday. I've been thinking about this for weeks actually. There are several people who could step into the CEO role. The company will be fine. She studied his face, looking for any sign of regret or second-guessing. But he seemed calm, resolved. Like he'd already made peace with the decision. You're really going to do it, she said. You're really going to walk away. I'm not walking away, he corrected. I'm shifting priorities. The company will always be important to me, it's my legacy, something I built from nothing. But it doesn't have to consume every waking moment of my life. They stood there looking at each other, both of them seeming to realize at the same time that they were married people who had been living apart for 3 months. The question of what happened next hung in the air between them. I should probably go back to my apartment, Jasmine said finally. Give us both some time to process everything that's happened tonight. Marcus's face fell slightly, but he nodded. Of course. I understand. This is all moving pretty fast. It's not that I don't want to stay, she said quickly. It's just, we have a lot to figure out. Practical things like where we're going to live while we're transitioning, what we're going to do about my apartment lease, how we're going to make this work. You're right, Marcus said. We should take this one step at a time. But neither of them moved toward the door. They just stood there, neither wanting to end this perfect night, neither wanting to break the spell that had brought them back together. Actually, Jasmine said after a moment, would it be okay if I stayed tonight? I mean, we're still married. Technically. The smile that spread across Marcus's face was radiant. Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure, she said. I want to wake up next to my husband tomorrow morning. It's been too long. He reached for her then, pulling her into his arms and spinning her around. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. When he set her down, they were both grinning like teenagers. I can't believe this is really happening, Marcus said. I can't believe you're giving us another chance. I can't believe you bought me a house, she replied. I can't believe you remembered every detail of our early dates. I can't believe you're willing to step back from the company. I'd do anything for you, he said seriously. I should have realized that a long time ago. They went upstairs to their bedroom, not his bedroom, she realized with a start. For the first time in months she belonged here again. Her clothes were still in the closet, her books still on the nightstand. Marcus had left everything exactly as it was when she'd moved out, like he'd been waiting for her to come home. I haven't slept well since you left, Marcus admitted as they got ready for bed. This place was too quiet without you. I haven't slept well either, she said. My apartment bed is too small, and it doesn't smell like you. They climbed into bed together and for a moment it felt awkward. They'd been intimate so many times before, but everything felt new now. Different. Like they were starting over. Can I hold you? Marcus asked quietly. In response, she moved closer to him, letting him wrap his arms around her. She pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling his heartbeat beneath her cheek. I missed this, she whispered. Me too, he replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I missed everything about you. The way you hum when you're cooking, the way you steal all the covers, the way you argue with the news when it's on TV. She laughed softly. I do not argue with the TV. You absolutely do. Especially during election season. They talked quietly for a while, sharing things they'd missed about each other, making plans for their future. Marcus told her about the therapy sessions, about the insights he'd gained about himself and their relationship. Jasmine told him about the lonely months in her apartment, about the job interviews she'd been going on, about the friends who'd supported her through the separation. "I'm sorry I put you through that," Marcus said when she'd finished. "I'm sorry you had to rebuild your life because I couldn't get my priorities straight." "We both made mistakes," she said. "I should have been more direct about what I needed. I should have demanded that you make changes instead of just hoping you would." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You shouldn't have had to demand that your husband pay attention to you. That should have been a given." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, both of them sleeping better than they had in months. When Jasmine woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the windows and Marcus was already awake, watching her with a soft smile on his face. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "Good morning," she replied, stretching languidly. "What time is it?" "Almost 9. I've been awake for an hour, just watching you sleep." "That's not creepy at all," she teased. "I couldn't help it. I kept thinking I was going to wake up and find out this was all a dream." She rolled over to face him fully, taking in his rumpled hair and sleepy expression. He looked younger in the morning light, more relaxed than she'd seen him in ages. "It's not a dream," she said, leaning over to kiss him softly. "We're really doing this." "We're really doing this," he agreed. "So what do you want to do first? Call the lawyers? Start looking at houses? Plan our new life?" "First," she said, settling back into his arms, "I want to stay in bed with my husband for a while longer. We have the rest of our lives to figure everything else out." Marcus tightened his arms around her, and she could feel him smiling against her hair. "I love the sound of that," he said. "The rest of our lives." As they lay there together, Jasmine felt a peace she hadn't experienced in months. The future was uncertain and there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she believed they could overcome anything as long as they faced it together. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock Monday morning. Jasmine sat in the lobby of Marcus's building, waiting for him to come down and tell her how it had gone. She was nervous, though she wasn't sure why. They'd talked through his decision extensively over the weekend, and Marcus had seemed completely at peace with stepping back from his role as CEO. The elevator doors opened and Marcus emerged, looking relieved but also a little shell-shocked. Several board members followed him out, shaking his hand and patting his shoulder. Jasmine could see a mix of surprise and concern on their faces, but also respect. "How did it go?" she asked when he reached her. "Better than I expected," Marcus said, taking her hand. "There was some initial shock, obviously. But when I explained my reasons and presented my transition plan, they were very supportive." "And David Chin? Is he going to take over as CEO?" Marcus nodded. "He's been my VP of operations for 3 years. He knows the company inside and out, and the board has complete confidence in him. The transition should be smooth." David Chin was someone Jasmine had met several times at company events. He was brilliant, dedicated, and had a wonderful family. She'd always liked him and his wife Susan. "When does it become official?" 2 weeks, Marcus said. "I'll spend the next 2 weeks transitioning my responsibilities and making sure David has everything he needs. After that, I'll move into an advisory role part-time, mostly strategic planning and big-picture stuff." They walked out of the building together, and Jasmine could see some of the tension leaving Marcus's shoulders with each step. It was like he was physically shedding the weight of constant responsibility. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Scared," he admitted. "Relieved. Excited. All at the same time. I keep waiting for the panic to set in, for the voice in my head to start screaming that I'm making a huge mistake." "And is it?" "No," he said with surprising certainty. "The voice is quiet. For the first time in years, my mind feels peaceful." They spent the afternoon apartment hunting. Jasmine's lease wasn't up for another 2 months, but they wanted to find a place in the city that they could use during Marcus's transition period and for the days when he needed to be in town for work. The third apartment they looked at was perfect, a cozy 2-bedroom in the village with exposed brick walls and large windows that let in lots of natural light. It was a far cry from the penthouse, but it felt more like a home than their old place ever had. "It's perfect," Jasmine said as they stood in the empty living room. "It feels like us." "Are you sure you don't mind downsizing?" Marcus asked. "We could afford something bigger, something more like what you're used to." She shook her head. "I never needed the penthouse, Marcus. I just needed you. This place feels warm, lived in. I can picture us being happy here." They put in an application that same day. The realtor, who had clearly done her research on Marcus's net worth, seemed shocked that they were interested in such a modest place. But Marcus just smiled and said they were looking for a home, not a showpiece. That evening they had dinner with Dr. Chen, Marcus's therapist. She had suggested that Jasmine join one of their sessions so they could discuss their plan for moving forward as a couple. "I have to say, I'm impressed by the progress Marcus has made," Dr. Chen said as they settled into her comfortable office. "When he first came to see me, he was completely disconnected from his emotional life. He's done a lot of hard work to get to this point." "What kind of work?" Jasmine asked, curious about what Marcus had been going through during their separation. "We've spent a lot of time exploring his relationship with success and achievement," Dr. Chen explained. "Marcus grew up with the belief that his worth as a person was tied to what he could accomplish, how much he could provide. That's a common issue for people who've experienced poverty or instability in childhood." Jasmine looked at Marcus, who was listening intently. "Is that how you felt? Like you weren't worth loving unless you were successful?" "Every day," Marcus said quietly. "Even after we got married, even after you showed me over and over that you loved me for who I was, not what I had. I kept thinking I had to earn your love, keep proving that I deserved it." "But that's not how love works," Jasmine said gently. "I know that now," Marcus replied. "Or at least I'm learning it. Dr. Chin has been helping me understand that love isn't something you earn or lose based on performance. It's something you give and receive freely." Dr. Chin nodded approvingly. "We've also been working on Marcus's fear of vulnerability. Success became a way for him to feel in control, to avoid the uncertainty that comes with truly intimate relationships. I was scared that if I slowed down, if I stopped achieving, you'd see who I really was underneath all the accomplishments," Marcus explained to Jasmine. "And that maybe you wouldn't like what you saw." "Marcus," Jasmine said, reaching for his hand, "I fell in love with you before you had any of this. I fell in love with the man who took me to delis and jazz clubs, who talked about his dreams, who made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world. I know that intellectually," Marcus said. "But emotionally, it's taken me a long time to really believe it." They spent the next hour discussing practical strategies for their renewed relationship. Dr. Chin suggested regular check-ins, clear boundaries around work time, and ongoing couples therapy to help them navigate the challenges ahead. "The most important thing is communication," Dr. Chin emphasized. "Marcus, you need to be honest about when you're struggling with old patterns. And Jasmine, you need to feel safe expressing your needs without fear of conflict." "What if he starts slipping back into old habits?" Jasmine asked. "What if the work starts taking over again?" "Then we address it immediately," Dr. Chin said. "No waiting, no hoping it will get better on its own. The moment either of you notices the balance shifting, you talk about it." Marcus squeezed Jasmine's hand. "I want you to call me out if I start prioritizing work over us again. Don't protect my feelings or worry about being nagging. Our marriage is more important than my ego." After the session, they walked through the city streets, talking about everything they'd discussed. The evening air was cool and crisp, perfect for the kind of long walks they used to take when they were first dating. "I'm proud of you," Jasmine said as they stopped to look in the window of a bookstore. "For doing the therapy, for being willing to change, for stepping back from the company. I know none of this is easy for you." "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," Marcus admitted. "But also the most important. I almost lost you, Jasmine. I almost threw away the best thing in my life because I was too proud and too scared to ask for help." "But you didn't lose me," she reminded him. "I'm here. We're here." "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly. "With this decision, I mean. Are you sure this is what you want?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. They were standing under a street lamp, and the soft light made his dark skin glow. He looked vulnerable, uncertain, like he still couldn't quite believe she'd chosen to stay. "Marcus, 2 days ago I was planning to sign divorce papers. Today I'm apartment hunting with my husband and planning our new life together." "Am I sure?" "Honestly, no. I'm terrified. But I'm also happier than I've been in months." "What scares you the most?" "That this is temporary," she said honestly. "That in 6 months or a year, you'll get bored with our quiet life and start looking for the next mountain to climb. That I'll end up feeling invisible again." He nodded, understanding her fear. "I'm scared of that too. But Jasmine, I've learned something about myself these past few months. The reason I kept chasing bigger and bigger successes was because I was trying to fill a hole inside me. A hole that I thought was about not having enough money or power or recognition. And now I realized that hole was about not feeling worthy of love. About not believing I deserved happiness unless I earned it. But you've shown me that love isn't something you earn. It's something you accept, something you nurture, something you choose every day." They resumed walking, and Jasmine felt some of her anxiety ease. This Marcus, the one who could articulate his feelings and examine his motivations, was someone she could build a future with. "There's something else I want to talk to you about," Marcus said as they approached their building. "Something I've been thinking about a lot." "What's that?" "Kids," he said simply. "I know we talked about it before and I know I've been reluctant. But I want that with you, Jasmine. I want to have a family with you." Her heart skipped a beat. They'd stopped trying to conceive about 8 months ago, when Marcus had become so consumed with work that their physical relationship had all but disappeared. She'd assumed that dream was dead. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Kids are a huge responsibility. They need attention, time, presence. All the things you've struggled with." "Which is exactly why I needed to get my priorities straight first," Marcus said. "I needed to prove to myself that I could be present for you before I could even think about being present for children." "And you think you're ready now?" "I think I'm getting there," he said. "I know I'm not perfect and I know I'll make mistakes. But I want to try. I want to give you the family you've always wanted." Jasmine felt tears prick at her eyes. She'd been afraid to even hope for this, afraid to bring up the subject of children when their marriage was so fragile. "I want that too," she whispered. "I've wanted it for so long." "Then let's make it happen," Marcus said, pulling her into his arms right there on the sidewalk. "Let's move to the cottage, let's build the life we always talked about, and let's start the family we've been dreaming of." As they stood there holding each other, Jasmine felt a happiness so complete it almost overwhelmed her. 2 days ago she'd been preparing to end her marriage. Now she was planning a future that included everything she'd ever wanted. But as they rode the elevator up to the penthouse, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Marcus was saying all the right things, making all the right promises. But would he follow through? Would he really be able to change so completely? Only time would tell. But for tonight she was going to choose hope over fear. She was going to choose love over self-protection. She was going to choose the life they could build together over the safety of being alone. 3 weeks later they were living in the cottage. The transition had been smoother than either of them had expected. Marcus had officially stepped down as CEO, though he still went into the city twice a week for meetings and strategic planning sessions. Jasmine had quit her job at the nonprofit, planning to take some time to figure out what she wanted to do next. The cottage was everything she dreamed it would be. They'd spent their first week there painting walls, arranging furniture and planting a vegetable garden. Marcus had thrown himself into the home improvement projects with the same intensity he'd once reserved for business deals, but somehow it felt different. Healthier. Like he was channeling his drive into building something beautiful rather than just accumulating more success. "I think we should get chickens," Jasmine said one morning as they sat on the front porch with their coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold. "Chickens?" Marcus laughed. "Do you know anything about taking care of chickens? How hard can it be? There are books, YouTube videos. I bet the neighbors could help us." The neighbors were an elderly couple named Frank and Marie who had lived down the road for 30 years. They'd brought over a casserole their second day in the cottage and had been dropping by regularly ever since, offering advice about everything from the best place to buy hay to which local contractors were trustworthy. "If you want chickens, we'll get chickens," Marcus said, wrapping his arm around her. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually looking forward to learning about chicken care." "Really? The great Marcus Williams wants to learn about poultry?" "The great Marcus Williams wants to learn about everything that makes his wife happy," he corrected. "Besides, there's something appealing about a completely different kind of problem solving. No board meetings, no hostile takeovers, just figuring out how to keep some birds healthy and productive." Jasmine leaned into his embrace, marveling at how different he seemed out here. In the city, Marcus had always been slightly tense, slightly on edge, like he was constantly waiting for the next crisis to manage. Here he was relaxed, present, fully engaged with whatever they were doing. "I have news," she said, setting down her coffee cup. "Good news or bad news?" "That depends on how you look at it," she said, suddenly nervous about his reaction. "I'm pregnant." Marcus went completely still beside her. For a moment she wondered if he'd even heard her. Then he turned to look at her, his eyes wide with shock and something that might have been panic. "Pregnant?" he repeated. 8 weeks, she confirmed. "I found out yesterday when I went to Dr. Peterson for my annual checkup. I wanted to be sure before I told you." Marcus stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Not the polite, controlled smile she'd grown used to seeing from him, but a genuine, unguarded expression of pure joy. "We're having a baby," he said, like he was testing out how the words sounded. "We're having a baby," she confirmed. "Oh my God, Jasmine, we're having a baby." He jumped up from his chair and swept her into his arms, spinning her around just like he had the night they'd decided to try again. I can't believe it. I mean, I know we've been trying, but I can't believe it actually happened. Are you happy? She asked when he set her down, searching his face for any sign of the fear he'd expressed about becoming a father. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it, he said, his hands moving to rest on her still flat stomach. I'm terrified and excited and grateful and completely overwhelmed. But mostly God, I'm so happy I can barely breathe. Relief flooded through her. She'd been worried about how he'd react, whether the reality of impending parenthood would send him spiraling back into his old patterns of anxiety and overwork. Dr. Peterson says everything looks good so far, she continued. The baby is due in January. We should probably start thinking about turning the spare bedroom into a nursery. January, Marcus repeated, like he was trying to make the timeline real in his mind. That gives us about 7 months to get ready. To get ready for the biggest change of our lives, Jasmine added. Marcus sat back down and pulled her onto his lap, his arms wrapping around her protectively. Are you scared? He asked. Absolutely terrified, she admitted. But also so excited I can hardly stand it. We're going to be parents, Marcus. We're going to have a little person who depends on us for everything. I promise you, Marcus said, his voice serious and determined. I promise you that I will be the father this child deserves. I will be present, I will be engaged, I will not let work come between me and my family. I believe you, she said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. The Marcus who had stepped away from his empire to focus on their marriage was capable of making that promise and keeping it. They spent the rest of the morning calling their families and close friends to share the news. Marcus's parents, who lived in Florida, were overjoyed. Jasmine's mother cried happy tears and immediately started planning her visit for when the baby was born. I should probably call David and let him know, Marcus said as they finished lunch. The pregnancy doesn't change anything about my role at the company, but he should be aware that I'll be even less available once the baby comes. How do you think he'll react? He'll be happy for us, Marcus said confidently. David's a good man and he's got 3 kids of his own. He understands that family comes first. That afternoon, they drove to the local bookstore and came home with an armload of pregnancy and parenting books. They spent the evening reading on the couch, Marcus occasionally reaching over to rest his hand on Jasmine's stomach. I can't feel anything yet, he said after the 3rd or 4th time he'd done it. Give it a few more weeks, Jasmine laughed. The books say I should start showing around 12 weeks, and we might be able to feel movement around 16 to 20 weeks. I can't wait, Marcus said. I want to feel our baby move. I want to see you grow round with our child. I want all of it, Jasmine. Every single moment. That night, as they lay in bed, Marcus kept his hand on her stomach while they talked about their hopes and fears for their child. I want to be a good father, he said quietly. I want to be better than my dad was. Present, involved, supportive. You will be, Jasmine assured him. You're already thinking about what kind of father you want to be. That's more than a lot of men do. What kind of mother do you want to be? Patient, she said immediately. Understanding. I want to be the kind of mom who listens, who doesn't judge, who makes our child feel safe and loved no matter what. You'll be an amazing mother, Marcus said with certainty. You have so much love to give. Our child is going to be so lucky to have you. As Jasmine drifted off to sleep that night, she felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. They were building the life she'd always dreamed of, a quiet home in the country, a husband who put family first, and now a baby on the way. After all the pain and uncertainty of the past year, everything was finally falling into place. But late that night, she woke up to find Marcus's side of the bed empty. She could see light coming from the small office he'd set up in what used to be the cottage's formal dining room. Through the doorway she could see him sitting at his laptop, completely absorbed in whatever he was working on. For a moment her old fears came rushing back. Was this how it started before? Late-night work sessions that gradually took over more and more of their time together? She got up and padded quietly to the office doorway, watching him work. He was focused but not frantic, typing steadily but not with the manic energy she remembered from his worst workaholic periods. Hey, she said softly. Marcus looked up, his face immediately shifting to concern. I'm sorry, did I wake you? I was trying to be quiet. What are you working on? She asked, coming into the room. Just some notes for David about the Henderson merger, Marcus said, closing the laptop. I couldn't sleep and I had some ideas I didn't want to forget. At 2 a.m? Marcus looked at the clock, seeming surprised by the time. I guess I got carried away. I'm sorry, I should have. Marcus, Jasmine interrupted gently. It's okay. You're allowed to work sometimes. You're allowed to have ideas in the middle of the night. I just want to make sure you're not slipping back into old patterns. He stood up and pulled her into his arms. I'm not, he said firmly. I was just excited about something and I wanted to get it down while it was fresh in my mind. But you're right to check on me. Please always check on me if you're worried. Promise me something, she said, looking up at him. Anything. Promise me that when the baby comes, you won't use work as an escape. Promise me that when things get hard, and they will get hard, you won't disappear into your office. I promise, Marcus said without hesitation. I promise you that our child will never have to compete with my job for my attention. Family first, always. As they walked back to bed together, Jasmine felt her anxiety ease. This wasn't the old Marcus, working compulsively to avoid his feelings. This was the new Marcus, someone who could pursue his interests without losing himself in them. But she made a mental note to keep watching, to keep checking in. Old habits died hard, and the real test would come when they were sleep-deprived new parents dealing with all the stress and chaos that came with a baby. For now, though, she was going to choose to trust. She was going to choose to believe that the man who had given up his empire for love could also be the kind of father who put his child first. She was going to choose hope over fear, one day at a time. 4 months later, Jasmine was definitely showing. She stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom, running her hands over the gentle curve of her belly, marveling at how much had changed since that night she'd almost signed the divorce papers. You're glowing, Marcus said from behind her, wrapping his arms around her and resting his hands on top of hers. I'm sweating, she corrected. It's 90 degrees outside and I'm carrying an extra 20 pounds. Glowing is just a nice way of saying I'm constantly overheated. Marcus laughed and kissed her neck. You're beautiful, he said simply. Pregnancy suits you. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who can't see your feet anymore. They'd found out 2 weeks ago that they were having a girl. Marcus had cried when the ultrasound technician had pointed out the baby's tiny features on the grainy screen. He'd insisted on getting copies of all the pictures, and now there were ultrasound photos stuck to the refrigerator, tucked into his wallet and framed on his desk. Speaking of our daughter, Marcus said, I have something to show you. He led her down the hall to what had been the spare bedroom. Over the past month, he'd been working on converting it into a nursery, but he'd been secretive about the details, wanting to surprise her. Are you ready? He asked with his hand on the doorknob. I've been ready for weeks, she said. You've been keeping me in suspense forever. He opened the door with a flourish and Jasmine gasped. The room was perfect, soft yellow walls with white trim, a beautiful wooden crib that Marcus had built himself, a rocking chair positioned by the window where she could look out over their property while nursing. But what took her breath away was the mural he'd painted on one wall, a tree with spreading branches, covered in delicate flowers and birds. Marcus, did you paint this yourself? I watched a lot of YouTube videos, he said, looking pleased with her reaction. I wanted her to have something special, something made just for her. Jasmine walked over to examine the mural more closely. It was clear that Marcus had spent countless hours on it, carefully painting each leaf and flower petal. The tree seemed to glow with life and warmth. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, she said, tears streaming down her face. She's going to love growing up looking at this. I hope so, Marcus said, putting his arm around her. I want her to know how much she was wanted, how much love went into preparing for her arrival. She'll know, Jasmine assured him. How could she not? Look at everything you've done for her already. It was true. Marcus had thrown himself into preparing for fatherhood with the same intensity he'd once reserved for business, but in the healthiest possible way. He'd read every parenting book he could get his hands on, taken an infant CPR class, and even started learning lullabies on the guitar. I have news, Marcus said as they stood admiring the nursery together. Please tell me it's not about work, Jasmine said automatically, then immediately felt guilty. Marcus had been so good about maintaining boundaries, and she didn't want to sound like she didn't trust him. It's about work, but not in the way you think, Marcus said with a smile. David called this morning. The company is doing better than ever. Stock prices are up, employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and they just landed the biggest contract in company history. That's wonderful, Jasmine said, and she meant it. Despite everything, she wanted Marcus's company to succeed. It was his legacy, his life's work. It is wonderful, Marcus agreed. And it's also proof that I made the right decision in stepping back. The company didn't need me micromanaging every decision. It needed good leadership and clear vision, and David is providing both. How do you feel about that? About not being the one closing the big deals anymore? Marcus considered the question seriously. A year ago I would have been devastated. I would have felt like I was missing out, like I was somehow less important because I wasn't the one in charge anymore. But now, I'm proud. I'm proud that I built something strong enough to thrive without me. And I'm grateful that I get to focus on what really matters. He placed his hand on her belly as he said it, and Jasmine felt their daughter give a little kick in response, as if she could hear her father's voice. She's active today, Marcus said, grinning as he felt the movement. She's been dancing around in there all morning, Jasmine said. I think she likes the sound of your voice. Good, Marcus said. I can't wait to meet her. I can't wait to hold her and sing to her and show her all the places on our property where the best flowers grow. The picture he painted was so perfect, so exactly what she'd always dreamed their life could be, that Jasmine felt overwhelmed with happiness. This was the Marcus she'd fallen in love with, the one who could find wonder in small moments and joy in simple pleasures. I love you, she said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. I love you too, he replied. Both of you. That afternoon, they drove into town to meet with Dr. Peterson for Jasmine's routine checkup. Everything was progressing normally, and the baby's heartbeat was strong and steady. Dr. Peterson scheduled their next appointment and reminded them about the childbirth classes that would start in a few weeks. Are you nervous about labor? Marcus asked as they drove home. Terrified, Jasmine admitted, but also excited. I can't wait to meet her, even if getting her here is going to be the hardest thing I've ever done. I'll be with you every step of the way, Marcus promised. Whatever you need, however I can help, I'll be there. She believed him. The Marcus who had once missed important dinners for business calls would not miss the birth of his daughter. She was certain of that. That evening they had dinner with Frank and Marie, who had become like family over the past few months. The older couple had been married for 45 years and had raised 3 children on their farm down the road. You two remind me of us when we were young, Marie said as they sat on the front porch after dinner, watching the fireflies begin to appear in the meadow. So in love, so excited about the future. What's your secret? Jasmine asked. 45 years is a long time. No secret really, Frank said with a chuckle. Just remembering that marriage is a choice you make every day. Some days it's easy, some days it's hard, but you keep choosing each other. And you have to grow together instead of apart, Marie added. People change over the years, you can't expect to stay exactly the same people you were when you got married. The key is to support each other's growth instead of resisting it. Jasmine thought about how much she and Marcus had both changed over the past few months. She'd become more confident, more willing to speak up for what she needed. He'd become more present, more emotionally available. They were different people than they'd been a year ago, but somehow they fit together even better now. Any advice about parenthood? Marcus asked. Don't try to be perfect, Frank said immediately. You're going to make mistakes. All parents do. The important thing is to learn from them and keep trying. And remember that children don't need perfect parents, Marie continued. They need present parents. They need to know they're loved and valued and supported. Everything else is just details. Later that night, as they lay in bed with Marcus's hand resting on her belly, Jasmine reflected on how much their life had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been preparing to leave him. Now she was carrying his child and planning their future together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd signed those papers? She asked quietly. Every day, Marcus admitted. And every day I'm grateful that you gave us another chance. I almost lost the most important thing in my life because I was too stupid to see what I had. We both made mistakes, Jasmine said. I should have been clearer about what I needed. I should have insisted on changes instead of just hoping they would happen. Maybe, Marcus said. But I was the one who created the problem in the first place. I was the one who lost sight of what mattered. And you're the one who found your way back, she reminded him. You're the one who chose love over success, family over money. That takes courage, Marcus. It doesn't feel like courage, he said. It feels like the most obvious choice in the world. Of course I choose you. Of course I choose this life we're building together. How could I choose anything else? As Jasmine drifted off to sleep, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain of their separation had been terrible, but it had also been necessary. It had forced them both to examine what they really wanted, what they were willing to fight for. Now they were stronger than ever, united in their commitment to each other and their growing family. Whatever challenges lay ahead, sleepless nights with a newborn, the inevitable stresses of parenthood, the ongoing work of maintaining a strong marriage, she knew they could face them together. Their daughter kicked again, a gentle reminder of the new life they'd created together. In a few months, they would be holding her in their arms, beginning the next chapter of their love story. And Jasmine couldn't wait to see what that chapter would bring. The contractions started on a cold January morning, just as the first snow of the season began to fall. Jasmine was in the kitchen making breakfast when the first wave of pain hit her, strong enough to make her grip the counter and breathe deeply until it passed. "Marcus," she called out, trying to keep her voice calm. "I think it's time." He appeared in the doorway instantly, his face shifting from sleep-rumpled confusion to sharp alertness. "Time? You mean?" "I mean our daughter has decided she's ready to meet us," Jasmine said as another contraction began. "These are definitely not practice contractions anymore." Marcus went into efficient mode, grabbing the hospital bag they'd packed weeks ago, calling Dr. Peterson's office and helping Jasmine to the car. But underneath his calm exterior, she could see the excitement and nervousness he was trying to contain. "How are you feeling?" he asked as they drove to the hospital, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "Like I'm about to do the hardest thing I've ever done," Jasmine replied honestly. "But also like I can't wait to meet her." The next 12 hours were a blur of contractions, breathing exercises, ice chips, and Marcus holding her hand through every wave of pain. He never left her side, never complained about how tightly she squeezed his fingers, never showed anything but complete focus on helping her through each moment. "I can see her head," Dr. Peterson announced. "Just a few more pushes, Jasmine. She's almost here." And then at 6:47 p.m. on a snowy January evening, their daughter entered the world with a healthy cry that filled the delivery room. Dr. Peterson placed the tiny, perfect baby on Jasmine's chest, and both parents burst into tears. "She's beautiful," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She's absolutely perfect." Their daughter was indeed perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark hair, and her father's deep brown eyes. She stopped crying the moment she heard their voices, looking up at them with an expression of solemn curiosity. "Hello, sweet girl," Jasmine murmured, stroking the baby's soft cheek. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." "What's her name?" the nurse asked, preparing to fill out the birth certificate. Marcus and Jasmine looked at each other. They'd discussed dozens of names over the past few months but had never quite settled on one. But looking at their daughter now, there was no question. "Hope," Jasmine said. "Her name is Hope." "Hope Williams," Marcus repeated, reaching out to touch his daughter's tiny hand. "Perfect." The first few weeks at home were exactly as challenging as everyone had warned them they would be. Hope was a good baby overall, but she still woke up every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. Jasmine was exhausted, Marcus was learning to function on no sleep, and they were both discovering that taking care of a newborn was harder than any job either of them had ever had. But Marcus was amazing. He got up for every nighttime feeding, changed diapers without complaint, and took over household tasks so Jasmine could rest when the baby slept. When Hope had her fussy periods in the evening, Marcus would walk her around the house, singing the lullabies he'd learned on the guitar. "I never knew I could love someone this much," he said one night as they sat together on the couch, Hope sleeping peacefully in his arms. "I look at her and I understand why people say they'd do anything for their children." "She's pretty amazing," Jasmine agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "Worth every minute of sleep we've lost." "Speaking of which, you should go to bed," Marcus said. "I'll handle the next feeding so you can get a longer stretch of sleep." "Are you sure? You've been up just as much as I have." "I'm sure," Marcus said firmly. "We're a team, remember? We take care of each other." It was true. They had become a team in a way they'd never been before. The challenges of new parenthood had brought out the best in both of them: patience, cooperation, and a shared determination to give their daughter everything she needed. 3 months after Hope's birth, Marcus got a call from David about a major crisis at the company. A key client was threatening to pull out of a multi-million-dollar contract due to some miscommunication, and David wanted Marcus's advice on how to handle it. "I can be there in 2 hours," Marcus said automatically, then stopped himself. "Actually, no. Can we handle this over video call? I'd rather not leave Jasmine and Hope right now." Jasmine, who had overheard the conversation while she was nursing Hope, felt a surge of love for her husband. The old Marcus would have been in the car before David had finished explaining the problem. The new Marcus's first instinct was to stay with his family. They spent the next hour on a video call with David and the rest of the executive team, brainstorming solutions to the client crisis. Marcus provided valuable insight and guidance, but he did it all while holding Hope, who slept peacefully through the entire meeting. "That felt good," Marcus said after they'd hung up. Being able to help solve the problem without abandoning my responsibilities here. You're a good father, Jasmine said simply. And a good husband. I'm proud of the man you've become. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, Marcus agreed. I don't even recognize that man anymore. The one who thought success was more important than love, who believed that providing money was the same as providing care. What changed? Jasmine asked, even though she thought she knew the answer. You, Marcus said immediately. And her. He looked down at Hope, who was starting to wake up and make the little sounds that meant she was getting hungry. I realized that nothing I could ever achieve in business would matter if I didn't have you two to share it with. As if to emphasize his point, Hope opened her eyes and looked directly at her father, giving him a tiny smile that made his face light up with joy. I think she recognizes me, Marcus said, his voice full of wonder. Of course she does, Jasmine said. You're her daddy. You're the one who sings to her and walks with her and changes her diapers. You're the one who chose to be present for every moment of her life. And I always will be, Marcus said firmly. She'll never have to wonder if she matters to me. She'll never have to compete with anything for my attention. That evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Hope sleeping in her carrier between them, Jasmine reflected on how far they'd come. A year ago she'd been planning to divorce the man she loved because she felt invisible in her own marriage. Now they were raising a daughter together, building the life they'd always dreamed of. Do you ever regret it? She asked Marcus. Stepping back from the company, moving out here, choosing this quieter life? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering her question seriously. You know what I regret? He said finally. I regret that it took me so long to realize what really mattered. I regret all the time we lost, all the moments I missed because I was too focused on building an empire instead of building a life. But do you regret the choice itself? Are you happy with the life we have now? Jasmine, Marcus said, turning to look at her with complete sincerity, this is the happiest I've ever been in my life. Waking up next to you every morning, watching our daughter grow and change every day, being present for all the little moments that make up a life together, this is everything I ever wanted, I just didn't know it. Even when she's crying at 3 in the morning and we're both exhausted? Especially then, Marcus said with a laugh. Because even in those moments we're doing it together. We're partners, we're a family, we're exactly where we're supposed to be. As the last light faded from the sky, they went inside to put Hope to bed. Marcus read her a story even though she was too young to understand it, and Jasmine sang the lullaby her own mother had sung to her as a child. Then they tucked their daughter into the crib Marcus had built with his own hands, in the room he'd painted with love. Later, as they lay in bed talking quietly about their plans for the next day, the next month, the next year, Jasmine felt a peace she'd never experienced before. This was what happiness looked like, not constant excitement or achievement, but deep contentment, the kind that came from being exactly where you belonged with exactly the right person. I love you, she whispered to Marcus as they drifted off to sleep. I love you too, he replied. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for giving me the chance to become the man I was supposed to be. Thank you for choosing to become him, she whispered back. And in the room down the hall, their daughter slept peacefully, surrounded by love and the promise of a future filled with parents who would always put family first. Epilogue 5 years later. The sound of laughter filled the cottage as 5-year-old Hope chased her 2-year-old brother Thomas around the vegetable garden, both of them covered in dirt and grinning from ear to ear. Jasmine watched from the kitchen window as Marcus pretended to be a monster, chasing both children while making exaggerated growling sounds that sent them into fits of giggles. Daddy's being silly again, Hope announced as she ran into the kitchen, her dark curls bouncing and her eyes sparkling with mischief, eyes that were exactly like her father's. Is he now? Jasmine said, wiping flour from her hands. She'd been making bread, something she'd learned to do after they moved to the cottage. It had become one of her favorite peaceful activities, especially on rainy afternoons when the children were napping. He says the tomatoes are going to eat us if we don't pick them soon, Thomas added, toddling into the kitchen behind his sister. At 2, he was already showing signs of his father's determined personality, but tempered with his mother's gentle nature. Well, we can't let that happen, Jasmine said seriously. I guess we'd better help Daddy save us from the dangerous tomatoes. Marcus appeared in the doorway, carrying a basket full of vegetables and wearing a grin that made him look like a teenager instead of a man approaching 40. His hair was starting to show just a touch of gray at the temples, and there were laugh lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during his corporate days. The garden is officially saved from the tomato invasion, he announced dramatically. But I'm afraid the carrots are plotting something suspicious. "Daddy, carrots can't plot," Hope said with the patient tone of a child explaining something obvious to a confused adult. "Are you sure about that?" Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because I could have sworn I heard them whispering." Both children dissolved into giggles again, and Jasmine felt her heart swell with love for this man who had learned to find joy in the smallest moments. The Marcus who had once been too busy for family dinners now spent his afternoons making up silly stories and teaching his children about gardening and the names of birds. "How did the video call with David go?" she asked as the children ran back outside to continue their game. "Really well," Marcus said, washing his hands at the sink. "The Singapore expansion is ahead of schedule, and the employee satisfaction scores are the highest they've ever been. David's doing an incredible job." Marcus still consulted for the company a few days a week, but it was true consulting now: strategic advice, big-picture planning, mentoring the next generation of leaders. He worked from his home office most of the time, and when he did need to go into the city, it was rarely for more than a day or two. "Any regrets?" Jasmine asked, though she already knew the answer. It was a question they'd explored many times over the years, especially in the early days when they were both still adjusting to their new life. "Only that I didn't figure this out sooner," Marcus said, pulling her into his arms. "I could have had 10 more years of afternoon garden adventures and bedtime stories and lazy Sunday mornings with my family." "You figured it out when you needed to," Jasmine said, leaning into his embrace. "And look what we have now." Through the window they could see their children playing happily in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm summer breeze. The cottage had been expanded over the years: a larger kitchen when Thomas was born, a playroom added to the back, a workshop where Marcus had discovered a talent for woodworking. "I got a call from Dr. Chin today," Marcus said. "She's writing a book about work-life balance, and she wants to include our story as a case study. Anonymous, of course." "What did you tell her?" "That I'd talk to you about it first," Marcus said. "But honestly, if sharing our story could help other couples avoid the mistakes I made, I'm all for it." "What would you tell them?" Jasmine asked, curious. "If you could give advice to couples where one partner is struggling with work-life balance, what would you say?" Marcus thought for a moment, watching their children through the window. "I'd tell them that success without love is just a very expensive way to be miserable," he said finally. "I'd tell them that no amount of money or achievement can fill the hole that's left when you lose the people who matter most. And I'd tell them that it's never too late to change," Jasmine added. "As long as both people are willing to do the work, as long as love is still there underneath all the hurt and disappointment, it's possible to find your way back to each other. Even when it feels impossible?" "Especially then," Jasmine said firmly. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to remember what's worth fighting for." That evening, after the children were in bed, Marcus and Jasmine sat on their front porch swing, watching the fireflies begin to dance in the meadow. It had become their nightly ritual over the years, this quiet time together to reconnect after the busy day, to talk about everything and nothing. "I have something to tell you," Jasmine said, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. Marcus turned to look at her, his eyes immediately focusing on the gesture. "Are you?" "About 8 weeks," she confirmed with a smile. "I found out this morning." The joy that lit up Marcus's face was the same pure happiness she'd seen when she told him about Hope, about Thomas. After 5 years together in their new life, after 2 children and countless moments of love and partnership, he still reacted to news of a new baby like it was the most wonderful thing that had ever happened to him. "3 children," he said wonderingly. "We're going to have 3 children." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his expression made the question unnecessary. "I'm over the moon," Marcus said, pulling her close and kissing her thoroughly. "I love our life, Jasmine. I love our children, I love our home, I love the person I've become since I learned to put what matters first." "I love you too," she said. "All of you." The ambitious man who built an empire, the father who builds tree houses, the husband who chooses love over everything else. As they sat there together, planning for their 3rd child and talking about the future, Jasmine reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with divorce papers and a last desperate plea for one more night together. It had nearly ended with signatures that would have torn apart the best thing in both their lives. But instead, it had led them here, to a porch swing in the country, to children laughing in the yard, to a love that had been tested and proven stronger than any challenge they could face. They had learned that real success wasn't measured in dollars or stock prices or corporate achievements. Real success was measured in the trust of a child who ran to you with scraped knees. It was measured in the smile of a spouse who knew you would always choose them first. It was measured in quiet moments on a porch swing, watching fireflies and feeling completely content with the life you'd built together. I used to think I had to choose between love and success, Marcus said quietly. I thought they were mutually exclusive, that I couldn't have both. And now I know that love is success, he said simply. Everything else is just noise. In the distance, they could hear the sound of their children sleeping peacefully, and soon they would add another child to their family. They had built something beautiful together, not just a business or a bank account, but a life filled with laughter and love and the kind of happiness that money could never buy. And as they sat there together under the stars, planning for the future and grateful for the present, both Marcus and Jasmine knew that they had found what they'd been searching for all along. Not perfect love, there was no such thing, but real love. The kind that survived mistakes and grew stronger through challenges. The kind that chose to stay and fight and build something lasting together. The kind of love that was worth everything they'd been through to find it.